let me tell you about a follow-up story. So, again, remember, in the spring of 2008, I got introduced to Fusion.io. I became official chairman of the advisory board June 1, 2008. A couple of months prior to that, my daughter had given birth to a new baby. His name's Moti. I was just with Moti yesterday. He's 5 years old, vibrant little kid. Took him to the Lego movie and enjoyed that with he and a number of our other grandchildren. So when Moti was born, Dr. Tom Judd said to me, who was the delivering doctor, "Hey, Dave," birth was over, and they cleaned stuff up, and he says, "Can I take you to breakfast?" I said, "Sure, Tom. Be happy to go to breakfast with you." And so we go to breakfast, and he says, "My son-in-law, his name's Brian Lebrecht. He lives in Southern California, but he's moving to Utah. And he needs to make some connections in the state of Utah. Can you help him?" I says, "Well, Tom, I'd be happy to. Let me know when he's going to be in town next. Maybe we can go to lunch, and we'll talk about some things." So sure enough, I go to lunch with Brian Lebrecht. I followed up for Tom and showed up for the lunch with Brian. We have a nice conversation. He's a very pleasant guy. I was pretty impressed with him, impressed with his knowledge of the law, the area of practice that he wanted to go into. And he asked me for my recommendations on how to get clients in the state of Utah. I says, "Well, you got to be out there. You got to be seen. You got to be seen as an expert in your area." He says, "Well, how do I do that?" And I said, "Well, join some community associations and so forth." So Brian does. He calls me up a couple of months later and he says, "Dave, I'm now chairman of the Speakers Bureau for the Utah Bar Association." And I says, "Congratulations, Brian." He says, "Will you do me a favor?" And I says, "What's that?" And he says, "Will you come speak at the annual meeting of the Utah Bar Association?" I says, "Well, where is that?" He says, "It's in Sun Valley, Idaho." I says, "What's the Utah Bar Association doing in Idaho?" He says, "I don't know. Don't go there. I think they should be doing it in Utah, but, So I Google Maps it. I find out it's a good 5.5, 6-hour drive one way from Provo, Utah, to get up to Sun Valley, Idaho. And he says, "Will you come speak? And here's the date. It's July 18th, and, here's the topic we'd love you to speak on." And I said, "Brian, okay, for you, I'll do it. I'll come." Right. So I know this story's getting a little attenuated, but it has a point to it. And so I go up. I do my speaking engagement. Afterwards, I'm talking to a young lawyer who'd come up and he asked me some questions. And he said, he asked me a few questions about my speech. And so I was visiting with him about that. And I looked down at a piano bench. Something, I don't know, got it? Yeah, there you go. Talking to him like this. And I looked down at the piano bench. And on the piano bench, there was a little white sheet of paper. And it says, "Keynote speaker, Utah Annual Bar Meeting, Steve Wozniak." Now for me, the founder of Apple, speaking at the Utah Bar Association, was pretty cool. And I said, "You know what? I can go play golf," which I love. I won the Utah State Senior Amateur Championship several years ago in my spare time. And but I love golf. I love to play golf, and so I'd plan to go up, give my speech, go out to the golf course, enjoy an afternoon of golf. But folks, sometimes little decisions that you make in life can have a massive impact. And that day, I decided to stay and to hear Steve Wozniak speak. And so I came to his speech, and I did what Max. That's what Max did. I sat in the front row that day. Because, hey, if I'm going to be there, I might as well be there full out and listen to Mr. Wozniak speak. And I happened to sit next to, let's see, what was your name? Logan. Max and Logan. Shake hands. Do you two know each other?
Do now.
Okay, you do now. He could change your life. You don't know what blessing Max could bring to you in your life 30 years from now. Hopefully you'll still be friends. Hopefully you'll connect after this. You'll form a deep, powerful, personal relationship. But I reached over and I said, my name's David. And I was sitting next to a young lady. Her name was Julie Roebuck. And I says, hey, Julie, much like I did to Natalie, I said, what's your story? And she said, oh, I'm Steve Wozniak's executive assistant. Well, wasn't that a happy coincidence? And I says, well, gosh, I've been in the computer industry X number of years, and I'm doing this with Fusion.io, and I've done this at Novell, et cetera. Oh, Steve would love to meet you. He knows all about the history of Novell and so forth. Would you have a moment to hang around after the speech? And I said, well, sure, and so forth. And sure enough, after the speech, Julie ran up to Mr. Wozniak and says, oh, you got to meet this lawyer here from Utah. He's the one guy in the room that knows a little bit about the computer industry. And so she introduces me nicely, and we shake hands, and he hands me his business card. Let's see if I can dig this out. Yeah, it's always easy to find, right? He hands me this metal business card. Doesn't sound like a normal card, does it? What does that feel like to you? Metal, right? And it's really cool because you can see here that he has in digital code his phone number, 408-888-888. That's Wozniak's personal phone number. It's on his card here if you want to call him. Please don't. But he's a great guy, by the way. And so he hands me his business card. He says, oh, email me about what you're doing. So that was the point of follow-up. I get in my car. I could have gone played golf, but I didn't. I drove the 6 hours to Provo, and I was just kind of blown away by this meeting with Woz. By the way, if you're ever in San Jose, there's a street called Woz Way. It's great in downtown San Jose. You want to have a street named after you. That's a cool thing. So I get home, and I construct this email, and I make it a personal email. I've heard a lot about you. We have XYZ mutual friends, et cetera, et cetera. And I says, would you consider joining the Fusion.io advisory board? Now, can you imagine how many times a day and in a week Wozniak is invited to invest or get involved in something? Well, I was shocked. He followed up. Great business professionals followed up. He followed up within 24 hours with a very nice note saying, I would be honored to be on your advisory board. That was an exciting day for me. And then I introduced him to some of the other people in the organization. He hit it off with the techs. And then a couple of months later, he sends me a follow-on email that says, you know, I'm so in love with this technology. Is there a way I can get more involved in Fusion.io? This from the inventor of, I see all the Macs out there, right? It's kind of crazy. And I said, sure. He became our chief scientist. I became CEO of Fusion.io. He worked for me as chief scientist, and it was great. But it all happened because I followed up.